Marcus Johnson stepped off the airplane at Dallas International Airport feeling tired but relieved. The 34-year-old man had spent 3 long days with his sick mother in Houston. She was getting better now, and that made his heart feel lighter. Marcus wore his Army uniform with pride. The green fabric was perfectly pressed, and his military medals shined on his chest. He had served his country for 12 years and earned every single one of those medals through hard work and dedication. The airport was busy as always. People rushed past him carrying suitcases and talking on their phones. Children ran between their parents' legs while announcements echoed through the building. Marcus adjusted his military duffel bag on his shoulder and started walking toward the security checkpoint. He needed to catch his connecting flight to Detroit, where his wife and 2 young children were waiting for him. As he walked through the terminal, Marcus noticed something strange. 3 security officers were standing near the metal detectors. They were not checking other passengers or doing their normal jobs. Instead, they were whispering to each other and pointing in different directions. Their faces looked serious and worried. Marcus had been through airport security hundreds of times during his military service. He knew what normal security looked like, and this was not it. The first security officer was a tall man with gray hair. His name tag read Officer Davis. He kept looking around the waiting area like he was searching for someone dangerous. The second officer was younger with dark hair and nervous eyes. He kept touching his radio and checking his watch. The third officer was a woman with short blonde hair who seemed angry about something. All 3 of them had their hands close to their weapons. Marcus continued walking toward them. He had done nothing wrong, so he felt no fear. His military training had taught him to stay calm in strange situations. He reached into his pocket to check his boarding pass and make sure he was going to the right gate. The small movement caught the attention of Officer Davis, who immediately focused his eyes on Marcus. Other passengers were also heading toward security. There was an elderly couple holding hands and moving slowly. A businesswoman in a fancy suit was talking loudly on her phone about some important meeting. A young father was carrying his sleeping baby, while his wife pushed a stroller full of bags. Everyone seemed normal and relaxed except for the 3 security officers. Marcus got in line behind the businesswoman. She was still talking on her phone and complaining about delayed flights. The elderly couple was in front of her, moving very slowly through the process. Marcus waited patiently like he always did. He respected other people and never tried to rush anyone. While he waited, Marcus thought about his family. His wife Sarah would be cooking dinner right now. His 7-year-old son Tommy would be doing homework at the kitchen table. His 5-year-old daughter Lisa would be playing with her dolls in the living room. They were expecting him home by 8 o'clock tonight. He had promised to read them a bedtime story about brave soldiers and magical kingdoms. The line moved forward, and soon it was Marcus' turn. He placed his duffel bag on the conveyor belt and removed his wallet, phone, and keys. He put them in the plastic tray, just like he was supposed to do. He had done this same routine so many times it felt automatic. Remove everything from pockets. Put bag on belt. Walk through metal detector. Collect belongings. Continue to gate. But today would be different. Today everything would change in ways that Marcus could never imagine. As he stepped toward the metal detector, he noticed that all 3 security officers were now watching him. Their eyes followed his every movement. The atmosphere in the security area suddenly felt heavy and tense. Other passengers began to notice something was wrong too. Marcus took a deep breath and stepped through the metal detector. He had no idea that his life was about to change forever. The metal detector made a loud beeping sound that echoed through the security area. Marcus stopped walking and looked confused. He had removed everything from his pockets just like he always did. His wallet, keys, and phone were sitting in the plastic tray on the other side of the machine. He could not understand why the alarm was going off. Officer Davis stepped forward quickly. His face was stern, and his voice was cold when he spoke. "Sir, you need to step back and move to the side right now." Marcus did exactly what the officer told him to do. He stepped backward and moved to the left side of the metal detector. He was still confused, but he wanted to cooperate with the security officers. The businesswoman behind Marcus was getting impatient. She kept checking her expensive watch and sighing loudly. "What is taking so long?" she complained to nobody in particular. The elderly couple had already collected their belongings and were walking away slowly. They kept looking back at Marcus with worried expressions on their faces. Officer Davis called over his two partners. The younger officer with dark hair came over first. His name tag said Officer Martinez. The blonde woman officer followed him. Her name tag read Officer Thompson. Now all three security officers were standing around Marcus like he was some kind of dangerous criminal. "We need to do a complete manual search," Officer Davis announced. His voice was loud enough that other passengers could hear him. Marcus felt embarrassed, but he nodded his head in agreement. He raised both of his arms up in the air, just like the officer wanted him to do. Officer Martinez started the search by checking Marcus' arms and shoulders. His hands moved roughly over the military uniform. Marcus could feel that the officer was being more aggressive than necessary. This was not how security searches usually went. The officer seemed angry about something, but Marcus had no idea what he had done wrong. Officer Thompson stood nearby watching everything. She kept her hand close to her weapon, and her eyes never left Marcus' face. She looked like she was expecting him to do something dangerous at any moment. Marcus tried to make eye contact with her to show that he was not a threat, but she would not look directly at him. Other passengers in the security line were starting to notice the situation. A young mother pulled her children closer to her body. A businessman stopped talking on his phone and began watching the search. An older man with a cane shook his head and muttered something under his breath about how things were getting out of control. Officer Davis stepped closer to Marcus. "What do you have in that bag, soldier?" he demanded. The way he said the word soldier sounded like an insult instead of a sign of respect. Marcus had heard that tone before from people who did not appreciate military service. It always hurt his feelings, but he tried not to show it. "Just my personal belongings, sir," Marcus replied politely. "Clothes and some family items. Nothing dangerous or unusual." He reached for his military identification card to show the officers who he was. But Officer Davis grabbed his wrist to stop him from moving. "Do not reach for anything without permission," Officer Davis said in a threatening voice. Marcus immediately put his hand back up in the air. His heart was starting to beat faster now. Something was very wrong with this situation, but he could not figure out what it was. The atmosphere around the security checkpoint was getting more tense by the minute. More passengers were stopping to watch what was happening. Some of them were taking out their phones to record the incident. Marcus could hear people whispering and asking each other what was going on. Marcus remained calm on the outside, but inside he was starting to feel worried. His military training had taught him to stay composed under pressure, but this situation was unlike anything he had experienced before. Officer Davis walked over to Marcus' military duffel bag on the conveyor belt. He picked it up with both hands and shook it hard. The bag made soft sounds as the contents moved around inside. The officer frowned and looked at Marcus with suspicious eyes. "Open this bag completely right now," Officer Davis ordered. His voice was getting louder and more demanding. Marcus nodded politely and moved toward his bag. He unzipped the main compartment and opened it wide so the officers could see everything inside. The bag contained exactly what Marcus had said it would. There were 3 neatly folded military uniforms on one side. A small stack of civilian clothes sat in the middle. Family photographs were tucked into a side pocket along with a phone charger and some snacks for the flight home. Officer Martinez reached into the bag and started pulling items out one by one. He threw the clothes onto the metal table without any care. The uniforms that Marcus had spent time folding perfectly were now wrinkled and messy. Marcus watched quietly but felt sad seeing his belongings treated with no respect. At the bottom of the bag was a small wooden box about the size of a book. It was made of dark wood and had beautiful carved designs on the top. The box looked old and valuable. Officer Davis picked it up and held it close to his ear. He shook it back and forth listening to the sounds it made. "This box feels heavy," Officer Davis said in an accusing voice. "What are you hiding in here?" Marcus tried to explain, but the officer interrupted him before he could speak. "I asked you a question, soldier. What is in this box?" "Those are my father's military medals, sir," Marcus said respectfully. "He served in Vietnam and earned those medals fighting for our country. When he passed away last year, my mother gave them to me. They are family treasures that mean everything to me." Officer Thompson stepped closer to look at the box. "How do we know you are telling the truth?" she asked. "This could be anything. Drugs, weapons, or something worse." Marcus felt shocked that anyone would think he was carrying illegal items. He had never broken a law in his entire life. Other passengers were now openly staring at the situation. A group of college students had stopped walking and were watching everything happen. An elderly woman was shaking her head in disapproval. A man in a business suit was taking pictures with his phone. Officer Davis opened the wooden box roughly. Inside were 5 military medals laying on soft red fabric. Each medal was attached to a colorful ribbon. There was a Purple Heart for being wounded in battle, a Bronze Star for heroic service, a Vietnam Service Medal, and 2 others that showed his father's brave military career. The medals were clearly genuine and obviously very old. They had the wear and patina that only real military medals develop over many years. Anyone could see that these were authentic honors earned through sacrifice and service. But Officer Davis was not satisfied. He picked up each medal and examined it like he was looking for hidden compartments or secret messages. He even tried to unscrew the backs of some medals to see if anything was hidden inside them. "These could be fake," Officer Martinez said to his partner. "People make copies of military medals all the time to fool security." Marcus felt his heart breaking as he watched strangers handle his father's precious medals with no care or respect. "Sir, those medals are real," Marcus said quietly. "My father bled for those medals. He earned every single one of them, defending freedom. Please treat them with the respect they deserve." The 3 officers looked at each other and then back at Marcus. They were not convinced by his explanation and seemed determined to find something wrong. Marcus stood quietly watching the officers handle his father's medals. He felt angry inside, but his military training had taught him to stay calm during difficult situations. He decided to call his commanding officer, who could verify his identity, and explain that he was a decorated veteran with no criminal record. Marcus slowly reached toward his pocket to get his cell phone. He moved his hand very carefully and spoke while he did it. "Sir, I am just getting my phone to call my commanding officer. He can verify who I am and confirm that I am telling the truth about everything." But Officer Davis saw the movement and immediately became alarmed. His face turned red with anger and fear. "He is reaching for a weapon," Davis shouted loudly. The words echoed through the entire security area like a fire alarm. Everything happened very fast after that. Officer Thompson grabbed her radio and called for backup. Officer Martinez stepped backward and put his hand on his gun. Officer Davis pointed his finger at Marcus and kept yelling, "He has a weapon," even though Marcus had not touched anything dangerous. Passengers throughout the security area heard the shouting and began to panic. A woman with 2 small children grabbed them and ran toward the exit. An elderly man dropped his suitcase and looked around frantically for a place to hide. The college students who had been watching pulled out their phones and started recording everything. Marcus immediately raised both hands high above his head. "I do not have any weapons," he said in a loud, clear voice. "I am a United States Army veteran. I served my country for 12 years. I am not dangerous. Please do not hurt me." But the 3 officers were not listening to his words. Fear had taken control of their minds, and they could not think clearly anymore. Officer Davis drew his weapon and pointed it directly at Marcus' chest. The gun was black and looked very dangerous in the bright airport lights. "Get on the ground right now," Officer Thompson screamed. Her voice was high and shaky with panic. She also drew her weapon and aimed it at Marcus. Now 2 guns were pointed at an innocent man who had done nothing wrong except try to catch a flight home to his family. Marcus felt his heart pounding inside his chest like a drum. He had faced enemy soldiers in combat zones overseas, but he had never been more scared than he was right now. These were supposed to be the good guys protecting American citizens. Instead, they were treating him like a terrorist. "Please, officers, I am not your enemy," Marcus said with tears starting to form in his eyes. "I fought for this country. I have 2 young children waiting for me at home. I just want to go home to my family. Please put your guns down." Officer Martinez was the 3rd officer to draw his weapon. Now Marcus was staring at 3 gun barrels all pointed at his heart. He could see the fear and confusion in the officers' eyes. They were just as scared as he was, but their fear was making them dangerous. The entire security area had cleared out except for a few brave passengers who stayed to record what was happening. Everyone else had run away or hidden behind pillars and walls. Airport announcements were telling people to evacuate the terminal immediately. Marcus kept his hands raised high and tried to stay perfectly still. One wrong move could end his life and leave his children without a father. The situation had gone from a simple security check to a life or death moment in just a few minutes. The airport terminal became completely silent except for the sound of Marcus breathing heavily. 3 security officers stood in front of him with their weapons drawn and ready to fire. Marcus could see their fingers on the triggers and knew that his life hung by a thread. "Please do not shoot me," Marcus said quietly. His voice was steady, but his eyes showed the fear he felt inside. "I have done nothing wrong. I am a veteran who served this country with honor. I just want to go home to my wife and children." Officer Davis was shaking with nervousness. His gun moved slightly as his hands trembled. He had never drawn his weapon on duty before and was not sure what to do next. The other 2 officers were looking at him for guidance, but he felt just as lost and confused as they did. Suddenly, 3 loud gunshots rang out through the terminal. Bang, bang, bang. The sounds were so loud that they seemed to shake the entire building. People who were hiding behind walls screamed in terror. Someone in the distance was crying and calling for help. But Marcus was still standing. The officers had fired their weapons into the air as warning shots. They were trying to scare him into surrendering, but they had not actually shot him. Marcus felt his knees become weak with relief and fear at the same time. The gunshots had been so loud that Marcus' ears were ringing. He could barely hear anything except a high-pitched buzzing sound. His whole body was shaking now, and he felt like he might faint. But he kept his hands raised high above his head and did not move a muscle. Airport security cameras had recorded everything that happened. The cameras showed clearly that Marcus had never reached for a weapon. He had only tried to get his phone to call for help. The cameras also showed that he had cooperated with every order the officers had given him. Within seconds of the gunshots, airport police and federal agents came running into the security area. They had heard the shots and thought there was an active shooter situation. When they arrived, they saw Marcus on his knees with his hands still raised and 3 security officers with smoking guns. "What happened here?" demanded Sergeant Williams, who was the head of airport police. He looked at the scene and could immediately tell that something was very wrong. Marcus was clearly not dangerous, and the 3 security officers looked embarrassed and scared. Officer Davis tried to explain, but his story did not make sense. "He was reaching for a weapon," Davis said. "We had to protect ourselves and the other passengers." But Sergeant Williams could see Marcus' military uniform and medals. He could also see that Marcus was unarmed and had been cooperating. "Put your weapons away immediately," Sergeant Williams ordered the 3 security officers. "This man is clearly not a threat to anyone." The officers slowly holstered their guns but continued to watch Marcus, like he might suddenly become dangerous. Marcus was placed in handcuffs, even though he had done nothing wrong. The handcuffs felt cold and tight around his wrists. He was then escorted to a small security office where he was told to sit in a metal chair and wait. "I served this country for 12 years, Marcus kept saying to anyone who would listen. "How could this happen to me? I risked my life fighting for freedom overseas. Now I am being treated like a criminal in my own country." The security office had no windows and only one door. Marcus sat alone, feeling confused, angry, and heartbroken. He thought about his wife Sarah, who would be worried when he did not come home on time. He thought about his children who were waiting to hear bedtime stories about brave soldiers. Outside the office, he could hear people talking in urgent voices. There were phone calls being made and radios crackling with messages. He heard someone mention lawyers and news reporters. Marcus realized that this situation was becoming much bigger than just a simple misunderstanding at airport security. The three officers who had drawn their weapons were also in trouble. They were being questioned by their supervisors and federal agents. They were starting to understand that they had made a terrible mistake that could ruin their careers and change their lives forever. While Marcus sat alone in the security office, his cell phone in the plastic tray began buzzing with missed calls and text messages. He could not answer it because he was still handcuffed and under detention. But outside the office, his story was spreading across the internet faster than wildfire. A college student named Jennifer had recorded the entire incident on her smartphone. She had been standing in line behind Marcus when everything started and had kept her camera rolling during the whole confrontation. The video showed clearly that Marcus had done nothing wrong and had been treated unfairly. Jennifer posted the video on social media with a caption that read, "Innocent Army veteran threatened with guns at airport security for no reason. This is wrong and needs to be seen by everyone." Within 30 minutes, the video had been shared over 1,000 times. The video was shocking to watch. It showed Marcus politely cooperating with every order the security officers gave him. It showed him trying to explain about his father's medals and asking permission to call his commanding officer. Most importantly, it showed that he never reached for any weapon or made any threatening moves. News organizations picked up the story within an hour. Television reporters were already on their way to the airport. Radio stations were talking about the incident during their evening news programs. Newspapers were preparing headlines for their websites and morning editions. The hashtag #JusticeForMarcus began trending on all major social media platforms. People from across the country were sharing the video and expressing their outrage about how a military veteran had been treated. Many of the comments came from other veterans who said they had experienced similar discrimination. Civil rights organizations also became involved very quickly. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People issued a statement calling for a full investigation. Veterans groups demanded that the three security officers be held accountable for their actions. Legal experts began discussing possible lawsuits on television news programs. Inside the airport terminal, chaos was spreading. Airport management was receiving hundreds of phone calls from angry citizens and news reporters. The phones in the main office were ringing constantly. Email inboxes were filling up with messages demanding answers and action. Director Sarah Martinez was the head of airport security. She had been in a meeting when the incident happened, but rushed to the scene as soon as she heard about it. When she saw the video on social media, she felt sick to her stomach. She knew that her airport was about to face a major crisis. Martinez immediately called an emergency meeting with all airport executives. They gathered in a conference room and watched the video together. Everyone in the room was horrified by what they saw. They knew that this incident could damage the airport's reputation for years to come. "How did this happen?" Martinez asked her staff. "How did three of our officers end up pointing guns at an innocent veteran?" Nobody in the room had good answers. The whole situation seemed unbelievable and completely unnecessary. Meanwhile, the three security officers were being questioned separately by internal affairs investigators. Officer Davis kept insisting that he thought Marcus was dangerous. Officer Thompson said she was just following her partner's lead. Officer Martinez claimed he was trying to protect other passengers. But their explanations did not match what the video clearly showed. The evidence proved that Marcus had been cooperative and non-threatening throughout the entire encounter. The officers had let their fears and assumptions control their actions instead of following proper procedures. Marcus' phone was still buzzing with calls and messages. His wife Sarah had seen the video on social media and was frantically trying to reach him. His commanding officer was calling to offer support and assistance. Friends and family members from across the country were reaching out to check on him. The story was also being covered by international news organizations. People in other countries were watching the video and asking questions about how minorities and veterans were treated in America. The incident was becoming more than just a local news story. It was becoming a symbol of larger problems in American society. Director Sarah Martinez walked quickly down the hallway toward the security office where Marcus was being held. She had watched the video footage from the airport cameras 3 times and felt deeply ashamed of what had happened under her supervision. Her hands were shaking as she reached for the door handle. Inside the small office, Marcus sat quietly in the metal chair. The handcuffs had been removed, but red marks on his wrists showed where they had been too tight. His military uniform was wrinkled from the ordeal, and his face looked tired and sad. When Martinez entered the room, he looked up at her with dignity despite everything he had endured. "Mr. Johnson," Martinez said softly as she sat down across from him. "My name is Sarah Martinez, and I am the Director of Security for this airport. I have reviewed all the video footage from today, and I am deeply, deeply sorry for what happened to you. This should never have occurred to anyone, especially not to a veteran who served our country." Marcus looked at her with calm eyes but did not speak immediately. Martinez continued talking, trying to find the right words to express how terrible she felt. "I want you to know that the 3 officers involved have been suspended immediately. We are conducting a full investigation and will take whatever actions are necessary to make sure this never happens again." The director expected Marcus to be angry and demanding. She expected him to threaten lawsuits and want revenge against the officers who had humiliated him. Most people in his situation would be furious and looking for someone to blame. But Marcus' response shocked her completely. "Ma'am," Marcus said in a quiet, respectful voice, "I appreciate your apology, and I can see that you are sincere. But I want you to know that I do not want those 3 officers to lose their jobs. They made a mistake, but destroying their lives will not solve anything. What we need is better training and education, not punishment." Martinez stared at him in complete amazement. She could not believe what she was hearing. Here was a man who had been humiliated, threatened with deadly force, and treated like a criminal. Yet, instead of seeking revenge, he was showing compassion for the people who had wronged him. "Mr. Johnson, I do not understand," Martinez said with confusion in her voice. "Those officers pointed loaded weapons at you. They fired shots in the air to intimidate you. They searched through your personal belongings and disrespected your father's military medals. How can you not want them to face consequences for their actions?" Marcus took a deep breath before answering. "Director Martinez, I learned something important during my 12 years in the military. Hatred and revenge only create more hatred and revenge. If we want to make things better, we have to break that cycle. Those officers were scared, and they let their fear control them. Fear makes people do terrible things." Martinez felt tears forming in her eyes as she listened to him speak. She had been in security work for 20 years and had never met anyone like Marcus Johnson. His response was unlike anything she had ever experienced. "But what about justice?" Martinez asked. "What about holding people accountable when they do wrong things? Those officers violated your rights and could have seriously hurt you. Surely they deserve some kind of punishment for what they did." Marcus nodded his head slowly. "Justice is important," he agreed. "But real justice is not about punishment. Real justice is about making sure this never happens to anyone else. Those officers need training about unconscious bias and how fear can cloud judgment. They need to understand that a person's skin color or appearance does not make them dangerous. I want to work with you to create a better training program," Marcus continued. "I want to help teach other security officers how to see people as individuals instead of stereotypes. If we can prevent even one person from going through what I went through today, then something good will come from this terrible experience." Martinez was completely speechless. She had come into this room expecting to deal with an angry victim who wanted revenge. Instead, she found a man whose character and wisdom were beyond anything she could have imagined. Marcus Johnson was teaching her about forgiveness, grace, and the true meaning of strength. Director Martinez was so moved by Marcus' response that she made an unusual decision. She asked if he would be willing to meet with the 3 security officers who had wronged him. Most people thought this was a terrible idea, but Marcus agreed immediately. He said that healing could only happen when people looked each other in the eye and spoke honestly. The meeting was arranged in a larger conference room with windows and comfortable chairs. Martins wanted the atmosphere to be as peaceful as possible. She also arranged for a counselor to be present in case anyone became too emotional during the conversation. Officer Davis was the first to arrive. He looked nervous and ashamed as he walked into the room. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking slightly. He had spent the last 2 hours thinking about what had happened and realized how badly he had behaved. When he saw Marcus sitting calmly at the table, he felt even worse. Officer Thompson came in next. She had been crying and her eyes were red and puffy. She sat down without looking at Marcus because she felt too embarrassed and guilty. She kept thinking about how scared Marcus must have been when 3 people pointed guns at him for no good reason. Officer Martinez was the last to enter. The young officer had barely spoken since the incident ended. He felt responsible for following the lead of the other officers instead of thinking for himself. He sat down heavily in his chair and stared at his hands folded in his lap. Marcus looked at each of the 3 officers with kind eyes. He did not look angry or threatening. Instead, he looked like a teacher who was about to help his students learn an important lesson. The room was completely quiet for almost a minute before Marcus spoke. "I want each of you to know that I forgive you," Marcus said clearly. "What happened today was wrong, but I do not hate any of you. You are not bad people. You are good people who made bad decisions because you were afraid. Fear can make anyone do things they never thought they would do." Officer Davis was the first to break down emotionally. Tears started flowing down his cheeks as he looked at Marcus. "I am so sorry," he said in a voice that was barely above a whisper. "I let my fear and my assumptions control me. You have every right to hate me and want me to lose my job. But instead you are trying to help me become a better person." "I have been a security officer for 8 years," Davis continued. "I thought I was good at my job. I thought I could tell who was dangerous and who was safe just by looking at them. But I was wrong. I was completely wrong. You are obviously a good man and a hero who served our country. I treated you like a criminal, and I will never forgive myself." Officer Thompson finally looked up at Marcus. "I followed Officer Davis because I trusted his judgment," she said through her tears. "But that was no excuse. I should have used my own brain and my own eyes. I could see that you were cooperating and being respectful. I should have spoken up and stopped what was happening." Officer Martinez was crying so hard he could barely speak. "You could have been killed because of what we did," he said. "Your wife could have become a widow. Your children could have lost their father. All because we were too stupid and scared to see the truth that was right in front of us." Marcus stood up from his chair and walked around the table. He stopped in front of each officer and did something that shocked everyone in the room. He shook each of their hands and looked them directly in the eyes. "We all make mistakes," Marcus said to each of them. "What matters is not the mistake itself, but what we learn from it. I believe that each of you can become better officers and better people because of what happened today. You can help make sure that no other innocent person goes through what I went through." The 3 officers were amazed by Marcus' grace and forgiveness. They had expected him to be angry and vengeful. Instead, he was showing them a level of character and wisdom that they had never encountered before. His response was changing their hearts and their understanding of what it meant to be truly strong. 6 months after the incident at Dallas International Airport, the story of Marcus Johnson had become famous across America. But it was not famous for the reasons that anyone expected. Instead of being remembered as a story about injustice and anger, it became a powerful example of forgiveness, healing, and positive change. Marcus worked closely with Director Martinez to create a completely new training program for airport security personnel. The program was called "See the Person, Not the Profile," and it taught officers how to recognize and overcome their unconscious biases. The training included real stories, role-playing exercises, and discussions about treating every person with dignity and respect. The 3 officers who had confronted Marcus became some of the most effective teachers in the new program. Officer Davis spoke honestly about how his fear and assumptions had led to terrible decisions. Officer Thompson shared her experience about the importance of speaking up when something feels wrong. Officer Martinez talked about the courage needed to think independently instead of just following others. Together, the 4 men and 1 woman traveled to airports across the country sharing their story and teaching other security officers. They spoke at conferences, met with government officials, and appeared on television programs. Their message was simple but powerful. Fear and prejudice can be overcome through understanding, education, and genuine human connection. Marcus also received recognition from the highest levels of government. The President of the United States invited him to the White House and presented him with a special commendation for his extraordinary display of character and his service to racial healing in America. The ceremony was attended by veterans, civil rights leaders, and the families of all 4 people involved in the original incident. During his speech at the White House, Marcus said, "This award does not belong to me alone. It belongs to every person who chooses forgiveness over revenge, understanding over hatred, and hope over fear." Real strength is not about carrying weapons or showing force. Real strength is about opening your heart even when someone has hurt you. The story also had a positive impact on Marcus' family. His wife Sarah was incredibly proud of how her husband had handled such a difficult situation. His children Tommy and Lisa learned important lessons about character and treating other people with kindness. The whole family received letters and messages of support from people around the world. Officer Davis, Thompson, and Martinez all kept their jobs and became model employees. They used their experience to help other officers avoid making the same mistakes they had made. Their supervisors noted that they had become more thoughtful, careful, and effective in their work. The incident that could have ended their careers instead made them better at their jobs. The airport security program that Marcus helped create was eventually adopted by airports nationwide. The Federal Aviation Administration made the training mandatory for all security personnel. Studies showed that complaints about unfair treatment decreased significantly at airports that implemented the program. Marcus continued his work as a diversity and inclusion consultant while also serving in the Army Reserves. He spoke at schools, universities, and community organizations about the power of forgiveness and the importance of seeing beyond surface appearances. His story inspired countless people to examine their own biases and treat others with greater respect. The incident that began as a moment of fear and misunderstanding had transformed into something beautiful and meaningful. 4 people who had been on opposite sides of a terrible conflict became lifelong friends and partners in making the world a better place. Years later, when people asked Marcus about that day at the airport, he would smile and say, "Sometimes the worst moments in our lives can become the most important moments if we choose to learn and grow from them. I am grateful for what happened because it gave me the chance to show that love is always stronger than hate." The story of Marcus Johnson proved that even in the darkest situations, human beings have the power to choose hope over despair and healing over revenge. His response to injustice became a beacon of light that continues to inspire people to treat each other with dignity, respect, and understanding.